Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. We did this event last year, and I thought it was a really great opportunity for us to kind of circle the wagons and talk about what's been going on, what we hope to be doing, and for all of you to have a chance to interact with one another. With all these with projects like this, you end up kind of by its nature isolated sometimes from your other people doing the same things you are, unless you end up bumping into each other in other contexts. So I hope this will be valuable for everybody, and at the very least, you'll walk away having a better idea of what we're up to. To start out, I'd like to do introductions. So I'm Ryan Perry. I'm the Digital Collections Librarian here at CLRC, as all of you probably know at this point. And I'd like each one of you to just kind of say your name, of course, and your institution. And we'll hopefully have a chance to talk more about your collections later, but just kind of start with the basics. So
Liz Metzger, I'm the director at the Canastota Public Library.
I'm April Bliss, director at Dunham Public Library, which is in Whitesboro, near Utica.
I'm Dan Warden with the Canal Society of New York State. I'm Jeff Paston with the Central New York chapter of the National Railway Historical Society.
Sarah Schultz with the Utica Public Library.
Bonnie Kisselstein, Boston Public Library.
I'm Kara Conley from the Community Library of DeWitt in Jamestown.
Brian Abbott from the Community Library of DeWitt in Jamestown.
I'm Maya McLaughlin from Fayetteville Free Library.
Dan Smith, Central Library.
David Whitner, Director of Center for Historical Research at Utica College.
Mark Wildman, CLRC.
Vanessa Nava, CLRC. Ashley Beavers, CLRC, and Scanny Atlas Historical Society.
And just really quickly, Vanessa and Ashley have actually just recently started working our Dig Lab. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but they're the folks that are going to be working on all of your, or many of your projects for grant projects and stuff like that. So it's great to have them on board.
I'm Susan Hughes from the American Pomeroy Historic Genealogical Association and the Pomeroy Foundation.
Amanda Perrine, I'm the director at Maxwell Memorial Library in Mills.
And Norm, we can put you on the spot since you just walked in.
Yeah,
Your name and institution.
Norm Perry, New Woodstock Free Library.
All right, thank you.
Out there.
Well, great. Thank you all for coming, and we have a lot to go through today. Let's see if my clicker works. So this is our agenda for today. A lot of what I want to tackle this morning are going through all of our various platforms, giving a quick recap of what they are and what we've been doing in them, and talking a little bit more about our new digital initiatives, stuff we're rolling out. And then after that, we'll have a short break, and I'm going to have you all answer the questions that are posted on the wall here about how we could be, what we're doing well, what we could be doing better, and what we could, what else we could be working on. You can answer this in terms of what CLRC could be doing for all these, what your institutions could be doing for all these, but I thought it might be a good way for us to kind of chat about where do we go from here, and what you'd like to be seeing from us. So we're going to be starting shortly our next plan of service for CLRC. So you'll probably hear some about that going forward, but it'd be nice to hear from this group specifically, so we can make sure that your priorities are voiced for what we should be doing. After that, we'll have lunch. We have Wegmans subs and like Wegmans platters here in the cafe, and then after that will be, it still says mini workshop here, but I really want to just have a discussion about marketing. Jeff was just talking when we were getting ready here this morning about how somebody at his institution just found this wonderful website called New York Heritage. And, I don't think that's an isolated occurrence. I think, there's definitely more we could be doing, not just for New York Heritage, but in general for, and I'm guilty of this probably more than anybody else in this room. You get your nose to the grindstone, and you're trying you're spending all your time getting the collections up there. You sometimes don't get around to thinking about what's happening with them once they're up there, and how we can actually have them used and appreciated. So that won't be as much of a workshop as a discussion, because I am no expert on marketing. Another thing, since we have a lot to cover, please interrupt me, raise your hand, ask questions as we go. It's too hard, or it's not too hard, but it's harder to go back and kind of get our head wrapped around another concept at the end. So please interrupt me if you have questions or want me to clarify stuff more. I'd be happy to do so. All right, diving right in. So our platform overviews and updates. These are the 5 different platforms and things I'd like to talk to you about this morning. So first, the one that consumes the majority of my time, New York Heritage Digital Collections. Most of you are probably aware of New York Heritage because you all have collections in New York Heritage. But just to kind of state it in a one-sentence elevator pitch, it's a statewide repository of cultural heritage materials, and the focus is on providing access. And I think the access part is sometimes, we might ask more of New York Heritage than we should at sometimes. It's really about access. It's not as much about preservation, but we'll come to that later. And of course, it's all the materials in New York Heritage are contributed by our partner institutions, such as all of you. And we have, and this is an interesting statistic, over 900,000 items and pages of materials. So that would be every yearbook page counts for one of those. But that's a really incredible quantity of materials. And then if you kind of take out all those individual pages, if you just look at each individual discrete object, there's, when I made these slides, at least 257,000 some odd objects, which is also a very large number. Another thing I should mention before I go any further, I'm going to be sending out all these slides after the fact. So, there's some links, there's some figures and stuff. Don't feel like you have to, copy it all down because you'll never see it again. I'll make sure I send this out to all of you. And I'm also hopefully recording this part at least, assuming that it actually works how I hope it will. So you'll also have a recording of me rambling on about all this. Anyway, of those 257,000 objects, around 23,000 are from the CLRC region. So we're not the largest contributor of the regional library councils, but we're up there. And in total, there are 327 institutions from the 8 library councils that are participating, and 47 of which are from CLRC. So again, numbers aren't everything, but it's pretty impressive, all the work that has happened. And those numbers have gone up pretty significantly over the last couple of years. So there's been a lot of good work by all of you in making that happen. And of course, I'm not only the local council liaison that works with all of you guys on a local level, I also am the project coordinator for New York Heritage statewide. So sometimes I'm often splitting my time between local concerns and trying to make sure the whole thing runs and doesn't fall apart. So if I seem really all over the place sometimes, that's why, or part of the reason why, I should say. So in terms of updates for New York Heritage, one of the major updates that hopefully I've communicated well to all of you is there's a new version of the metadata dictionary as of January. There's a lot of the work that went into the metadata dictionary were a lot of the edits were clarifications and trying to explain things better that weren't necessarily policy changes. But there were a couple of things that I'd like to highlight in case you guys haven't read through diligently the release notes for the metadata dictionary. First of all, the digital collection field is now explicitly mandatory. I always asked it of all of you anyway, but this is related to the structure of the New York Heritage website. It really needs to be in there. We did have some collections or some institutions here and there that didn't have it filled in, so their items would slip through the cracks of our website structure. So we've made it official. It's officially a requirement, not just a strong recommendation. This next one actually does impact a lot of your materials, and I've cleaned up some things where I found it. But HTML tags are no longer working in the newer version of Content DM. So a lot of you had, and this was actually suggested practice, a lot of people had like line break HTML tags in their contact information field just to make it look prettier. So now if you look at those collections, you'll see the HTML. It'll say, you know, the bracket BR instead of actually having a line break. So there are ways to change this in mass, and if you happen to notice it in your collections, please let me know and I can change it for you. But otherwise, at some point, I'll actually go through and look through all 47 institutions and see if I can fix them. So another change that's come through is we've kind of made more of a explicit judgment on how location fields should be used. So previously we said that they could be Library of Congress name authority, or sorry, subject headings. But now we're saying that it really should be in this kind of version of thesaurus for geographic names, which is municipality, county, state. So Syracuse hyphen Onondaga County hyphen New York would be for here. Yep.
Question regarding municipality. Sometimes, for instance, for Syracuse, you say you've had something in Salve. I'll use that as an example, or Fayetteville.
Yep.
Can you put Syracuse parentheses Salve or Salve parentheses Syracuse?
I would maybe suggest against that. I think if you have something that might be overlapping municipalities, or in the case of a railway collection where it spans multiple locations, then I would put that in a separate term. So I'd say, you know, the Salve hyphen Onondaga County hyphen New York semicolon, and then do
more
that next one.
specifically, I guess that was a bad example. Eastwood.
Oh, okay.
Eastwood's part of Syracuse. So do you put Eastwood, or do you put Syracuse, or can you put Eastwood parentheses Syracuse, or Syracuse parentheses Eastwood?
For that example, I would probably just put Syracuse, and then Eastwood would be in other fields, so in your description or somewhere else. Because a lot of times these location fields are more broad based, and it's more for looking. Think about it in terms of looking at New York heritage as a whole. So, you know, if you're zeroing into Syracuse, that's generally good. And neighborhoods within a city would probably be a little bit beyond the kind of.
In some cases, but it's like some of these towns have communities in them that are not incorporated regularly.
Yeah.
Communities.
No, there's always devils in the details, and you know, yeah. I mean, we can talk about specific examples if you have.
Notes take care of that?
Yeah, notes field. Yeah, your description field. You have a couple other places where you can kind of mention Eastwood and maybe explain it better, because that's the other thing. If you just see Eastwood parentheses Syracuse, you might not even know that means that Eastwood is a neighborhood of Syracuse. So yeah.
So, did you have a location field?
Yep.
I believe, if I'm looking at this information correctly, since I'm a former cataloger. And you have a local location field. So
Those are two different things, though.
Oh, okay.
Local location is like where is it on the shelf kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
So that's more of like
Oh, that's
to help folks find, you know, when a user says, "Hey, I really want to see the physical copy of this photograph," you know where to find it.
Okay.
So a lot of times, it often isn't used because, you know, yeah, it depends on whether it's useful for the institution uploading the materials, whether that information's helpful, or if it's just local history room. Well, okay, you probably knew that already. So yeah, that is a confusing title for a field. So local location are kind of two different things. But yeah, there's always kind of weird value judgments. And I think, you know, keeping this format and then finding other ways around explaining some of that stuff can be helpful sometimes. But yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and then things that probably aren't as much of a concern for all of you. We renamed some of the collection level fields. This is more to bring it into line with what actually ended up when we built the website. With the previous version of the metadata dictionary, it was kind of as we were building the website, so things changed over time, so we clarified a lot of that. And a lot of things were just giving more examples, explaining, some of the smaller details of things that people have come across that wasn't clear in the previous versions. Any other questions about the metadata dictionary? Yeah,
I
Jeff.
hate to be
No,
the one
no, please.
asking all the questions, but I recently stumbled on a problem, and I can't, right now off the top of my head, I can't recall exactly what the specific was, but when you go down to identify your original version, like, was it a newspaper clipping, there's a field that's missing, and that's what I could not, I'm sorry I can't recall it, but it's like you can have a slide, you can have a photograph, you can have, and it's one of those areas.
Like a physical format
It's a physical
field?
format that's
Okay.
missing. And yeah, I went down the whole list and I can't find it.
Mm.
Ended up using another thing.
Yeah, the physical format, so we did make some minor changes to that list. That's always a challenge because we're kind of confronted with this, keeping the list short enough to make it usable and not, also not leaving major categories out. So oftentimes you do have to kind of shoehorn things in a little bit. But on the plus side, that means that when people are using that facet, they might be more likely to find those materials rather than having, even more facets. So yeah, a lot of times you do have to make a value judgment. I feel like I'm doing that all the time with especially when I'm working on a strange
I wish I could
collection.
recall it, 'cause
Yeah,
it was
well-
a really specific thing that needed to be there.
If you come across it again,
Yeah.
shoot me an email.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah.
Can there just be a field that says other, so if it doesn't fit one of those?
Well, I mean, in that kind of situation, you would probably just leave it blank and explain it elsewhere. Yeah. So I mean,
So
like.
that other, and then in the notes say what it is.
Yeah, that field is recommended but not required, so if it's too weird, just leave it blank. Because you can explain it in the description or the notes or one of the other
This
fields.
was a real common thing, and that's what I said.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
amazed as you didn't have it.
Well, especially if it's a really common thing, let me know when you come
Yeah,
across
I'll
it.
have to look for it again.
Because we every time we do an edit of the metadata dictionary, we look at all those lists and try to realign them with, what people have added on their own without consulting it, or also, just what's been brought to our attention that we're missing. So absolutely let me know.
Later on in this slide presentation, is there an example of a record that's can be filled in? Maybe that would be a good thing to go through.
I don't have that in the slide
Okay.
deck, but I mean, I can go through that later if we have time.
Then maybe you could make
Yeah,
it
yeah.
with a little more concrete
I mean,
situation.
the problem is, some of the other library councils will actually do this is how you do metadata workshops. And part of the issue with that, and the reason why I don't do it with all of you, is that everything's so specific to your needs. So, yeah, I mean, as much as it seems like more time on my part to come out and meet with all you individually about your metadata, it actually ends up being better in the end, because if I did a generalist talk, then we would spend all our time talking about specifics, and then I'd also probably have to have consultations with you. So yeah, I think I'm not going into that kind of level today, and it's more like when you guys are ready to work on a collection, give me a call or shoot me an email, and we can meet and talk about that collection specifically. Because even one institution, if you start on yearbooks, the metadata for yearbooks is going to be a lot different than a metadata for a set of photographs. So every time you start a new collection, it's helpful to have at least a brief chat. So yeah. Any other questions about the metadata dictionary? Okay. All right, so you may have seen an email about this. This never really took off like I'd hoped, but we created these New York Heritage forums. It's like basically a message group to promote a community practice. I know some of you from our region have joined, and I really do still hope that it takes off. It's designed to be a place where folks can share their issues and help each other work through different strategies for projects. So I'll send out another email at some point, kind of reminding people that this exists and that you should join. I do try to put announcements in there from time to time, especially when there's like a new version of Content DM or something like that, where it's nothing that's going to probably impact your day-to-day lives, but if you're curious and want to see what's new on a more granular level than a once-a-year meeting, it might be a good spot for that as well. And all you have to do is sign up. You sign up with your name and institution, so we know that you're a contributor. It's not really meant for end users, because that way you can have conversations about copyright and some more sensitive things that you may not want the general public seeing. But this is a tool that's out there, and hopefully we can get more use around. Another thing that hopefully many of you are aware of, we did 2 physical and online exhibits over the course of the last year or so. So we had a Erie Canal women's suffrage exhibits that were both produced as standalone posters that were circulating, or are still circulating, to whoever wants to host them. So actually, if I hadn't been so frazzled to get everything else ready, I would have brought one of the posters in here. But they stand about this high and about this wide, and there's 4 or 5 per exhibit, and you sign up to host the exhibit at your institution for the course of a month. I know many of you have hosted them, and by and large, what we've heard good things about reactions to them. Some folks have even gone above and beyond. New Woodstock, for instance, you had a whole room devoted to the Erie Canal where you brought in other objects and kind of used the exhibit as a jumping off point, which is really cool. And we also have an online exhibit that the Erie Canal exhibit is hosted by the Digital Public Library of America on their website, and the women's suffrage is on New York Heritage. We are working on, actually I have a meeting in 2 weeks to start the process. We're working on an exhibit on immigration in New York State. So that's going to be we're going to follow a very similar model to these previous 2 exhibits. So we're meeting with 2 curators in a couple weeks to discuss the themes and start looking at what objects we want to bring in and what stories we want to tell with the exhibit. And hopefully, if our timeline works out, this will be available in the spring, or next spring. So hopefully that all works out. I know, since we've done 2 exhibits already, I feel more confident than maybe the first time around. As Dan can attest, it was kind of touch and go at various points, trying to get everything to line into place for the Erie Canal and women's suffrage exhibits. But we've heard that people have had good reactions to this, and we want to try to continue to do more of these. The other thing that we're in the process of rolling out is making our exhibit platform on New York Heritage available to anybody who wants to create an exhibit. We only have 1 exhibit up so far. We have the women's suffrage exhibit up. But we're hoping that's funny. There it is. We're hoping to make it, put together some documentation and such so that other folks can put together an exhibit themselves. So we have like these overarching themes, and then stories within the themes. So we really we spent a lot of time on the content and on the narrative piece of this, yeah.
So is that pretty much the raw material that ended up in the exhibit?
Yep. So
That's good.
there's more content on the online version than there are in the physical exhibits.
Okay.
My understanding, I was less involved in the physical exhibits than I was the online portion, but we pared down the content for the physical exhibits from the kind of larger narrative online. But yeah, so this, again, hopefully in the next few months. We're working on adding a second exhibit right now.
It's a nice
I'll be in
compliment, 'cause you
Tourget.
could have the physical exhibit, but then on a stand-up workstation, have this.
Yep. And the Erie Canal exhibit had a tablet that came along with it, but the tablet was really buggy and yeah, I'm not sure it was as effective as it could have been.
Okay.
But yeah, the idea is that you have
Hosting
yeah.
place could use their own.
Yep. And yeah, this is hopefully something where it will be you'll be seeing more of.
It's an aha moment, Ryan, thank you. I didn't know we had that.
Yeah. Well, it's hopefully there's a number of those today, and you guys are getting something out of it. Yeah.
With the digital exhibit, is that something that somebody has to click through, or does it go on like, almost like a PowerPoint, you're gonna have it like cycle through, or?
The exhibit on our platform is more click through. It's all it's built in a website format. So
okay.
you click through. I mean, there is like a kind of there are next and previous buttons at the bottom, so you could go through just in a sequence all the way through. But you can also jump around to specific themes and stuff. And the other thing, all the objects, I should have demonstrated this, but the objects are viewable within the exhibit, but then there's also links to the original objects. So, all the metadata and all like the full versions of the images are available as well. We're also, because we did this through the Digital Public Library of America originally, or the first two exhibits were designed for that. We also brought in a lot of materials from other DPLA contributors and other content, content repositories. So Library of Congress, Smithsonian, a wide variety of things. So it doesn't have to all be New York Heritage as well. So the main thing is you need to have something that you can link to as like an object. But if you have stuff in Omeka, or if there's relevant materials in Library of Congress or somewhere else, you of course would need to ask permission and kind of do some diligence on that in terms of copyright and all that. But it's really built to be pretty expansive, and hopefully you guys can all get your opportunities to build something for it in the future. Any other questions about exhibits? I kind of was powering through and didn't take a pause. All right. So as many of you know, we roughly a year and a half ago or so, we started offering digitization and metadata services in-house. So what this means is, and they've often been related to RBDB, or now Access and Digitization grants. But we can do projects ourselves. So if you write a grant to have, the popular thing these days is yearbooks. If you have yearbooks you want digitized, you could write a grant and specify in the grant that you want us to do the work. And at least, unless we have to jump through any bookkeeping, hurdles, we don't even write you a check. We just we set the money aside in our budget, and we hire folks to do the actual digitization work. Because we're not doing this we're doing this as a service to our members and not trying to turn a profit. It tends to be a lot less expensive to work through us than it does through a vendor. As a result, we've been able to do quite a few materials for the grants that we've worked on. And the other benefit is we're doing start to finish. So April just dropped off some more materials for us to digitize. We'll probably be in contact with her a couple times through the process in terms of landing pages, but other than that, we're digitizing, we're creating the metadata, we're uploading the materials, and hopefully, at the end we'll give you the finished product, and there's less worry about having to find the staff and the resources for your institutions to do it yourselves, or paying a lot of money to vendors, which we found out with some of the quotes that were requested from some of the large vendors that I was frankly shocked. I didn't expect, like when DeWitt and Jamesville, when you guys went to Hudson Archival, it was like thousands of dollars for something that, yeah, so. Of course, that's still an option, and there's certain materials that I wouldn't feel comfortable having us do ourselves. We're not set up to really do any audiovisual materials, particularly fragile or intensive materials. Might be better off with other folks that are able to have more conservationists on staff or folks that can do more of that work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Digital Dark Archive in a little bit, so I'll skip over that.
Ryan?
Yeah.
Can you digitize from microfilm?
We don't have the capability of doing that. Depending on what you're digitizing from microfilm, though, if it's newspapers, the Northern New York Library Network, which handles the newspaper website, which I'm going to get to, I think a slide or two, is they have the capability of doing that for newspapers. If you have other materials, then unfortunately you'd have to. Yeah. Okay. Well, we should talk about that then, because that's they have some. They're able to process that, and they have all the equipment and staffing to do that. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, and we're mostly working on grant projects at this point. But if you have other projects that you have that you need help with, it doesn't have to be. You don't have to go through the grant process to have us do the work. You just would, of course, have to fund it out of your own budgets. The other thing that's kind of that's exciting is we purchased a new book scanner, which if you have a minute after the if you have a minute today to go look, this book scanner on the left is brand new. We've scanned a handful of yearbooks on it so far, and we're still breaking it in, but it's working out really well and helping us. It'll hopefully help us do it a little more efficiently and split up some of the editing work from the scanning. What it's hard to see in this picture with the lighting is it actually has a book cradle and a glass platen that makes it a little bit easier for monographs. The book scanner on the right is one that our previous director, Demi Emerson, actually won at an ILA conference, and we've been using that for a year and a half. And we've done a lot of work on that machine. But one of the challenges is without a book cradle, sometimes with really fragile materials, it's been hard to scan things without doing damage or spending a lot of time finicking with how you're holding it and all that. So Kara actually spent quite a few hours on working on that machine, and of course Ashley and Vanessa are working on it now. But yeah, so we're excited to have 2 scanners now and hopefully be able to get through even more materials. Any questions about DigLab stuff? Any other questions? Okay. And of course you can contact me if you want to talk about a quote or when it gets back to grant seasons again, which is usually November. I actually don't have a slide about access and digitization grants, but bears mentioning in November, December, we'll open up the grants again as we typically do. And this is also an opportunity to get more work done without having to stress your staff. Okay, DPLA, the Digital Public Library of America, is a national aggregator of metadata from repositories from all over the country. They've added almost every state. I think they're missing like less than 10 now. And they're really only aggregating the metadata, so they harvest our metadata and process it and put it up on their website. And all of their pages link back to the original objects in repositories like New York Heritage. So it's really just another access point for your collections. Unfortunately, though, the funding for our New York State Service Hub was pulled by the Metropolitan New York Library Resources Council. They didn't. It was costing them too much, and they we're done with it. So actually, the last harvest under the current service hub is happening currently this week sometime. So if you, all of you who had been participating in DPLA would have heard from me about the process, and just as a quick update, after this week or so, or maybe next week, you're like, whatever you had in and whatever your metadata looked like as of the last harvest, which is harvested from New York Heritage, like within the last month, whatever that snapshot was is what it'll be until if we're able to put together a new service hub, which is kind of had its ups and downs. Currently, it's not looking very bright, but we're still kind of exploring options for making that happen. So it was really disappointing to have to announce to all of you that it was going away, but it takes a lot of. I'm hoping it's on hold.
Why would it go away? What's there is there, right?
Yeah, well, nothing's updating though. So I
Right.
guess the important thing to remember is if you're making substantial changes or like deleting objects or things are inaccurate to a fault, then you need to let me know and I'll ask DBLA to take those materials down, because there's no mechanism for updating any of your metadata. So whatever.
We've had books forever, boom, if publishing. This is the knowledge we had at date of publish. And so if it says this was the last update, then people say, oh, that was a year and a half ago, but.
I'm not sure it says anywhere when
Well,
it was
could, though.
harvested.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, maybe it could
Yeah,
say something
yeah.
to the effect of, this was last updated at such and such a time, and then people would know, and
Yeah.
hopefully there'll be another update.
Hopefully.
Instead of
Hopefully.
encyclopedias, right?
Yeah, it's
There'll be another update.
it's an uphill battle at this
Yeah.
point. Dealing with the politics and dealing with the funding and
That might change too.
yeah, who knows? It's an ongoing matter, and I'll make sure to update you guys when I have any new information to share. Any questions about DPLA? Yeah, I mean, whatever's in there now is in there now. I did try to at least clear out anything that I currently had waiting to be uploaded, so that whatever I had at that point was put up. So I'll let you guys know if anything progresses. All right, now we. So New York Heritage is really a repository for everything but newspapers, and newspapers at a certain point a few years ago were all pulled out of New York Heritage and put into New York State Historic Newspapers. The benefits of this site are that it's specifically designed to display and allow people to search and browse newspapers. And so it's just better equipped to deal with the quantity of materials. It's like I said, a searchable database of newspapers from across the state. Really, in order to participate, you just need to make sure that any newspapers that you have in your collections are, either out of copyright in the public domain, or you talk to the current publisher or the successor to whatever current publisher. So a lot of times when newspapers are shut down, they're being sold to another entity, or it can be complicated to find who to ask sometimes, but especially for older newspapers. But once you have the permission or due diligence where you feel confident moving forward, you can send microfilm and digital files to Northern New York, who will put them up in New York State Historic Newspapers. So they have a full rig for digitizing microfilm. They do charge for that work, but you can write a grant, an access and digitization grant to handle that. I think they charge 15 cents a page, which covers the digitization, the OCR, the optical character recognition, pulling the text out, and the upload process. So yeah, they manage that. They can't take physical copies though. So for those, what?
Oh, I said, because I have possible access to an actual collection of newspapers.
Yeah, so there's two routes for that. You can either there's a number of vendors that will digitize for you. A lot of times they also digitize and create microfilm. I think that's what Advantage does for your Fayetteville materials, right? Or are you having them do it from microfilm?
We're having them do it from microfilm.
Oh, okay, all right. Thought it was advantage. Maybe there's some of them create the microfilm and then digitize from the microfilm or for some reason. I can't remember who it was, but
There's probably a way to do it
yeah.
correctly.
And depending on the format, we are actually doing several newspaper digitization projects in our DigLab. But it has to be small enough to fit on our flatbed scanner or
Right, they're
flat
not
scanner.
the huge newspaper, but it's probably half the page, I'm trying to think, it opens.
Yeah.
So it's, I'll have to look at them.
Yeah, so if you look at the dimensions, and I can't remember exactly the scan area of that machine off the top of my head,
Bigger than those, I think,
but that is a possibility. And, you know, in some cases, we've done a few and it's worked out pretty well, but you know, again, if it's really large format or fragile, or there's a number of reasons why we wouldn't necessarily be able to handle it in-house. Another option. So not much of an update on New York State historic newspapers, but they are on track to have 9 million pages added sometime in June. I just saw recently Chronically America, which is the Library of Congress newspaper repository. They have like 15 million pages, so it's pretty amazing that like our little New York State version is actually have. That's a lot of pages, obviously. But they're constantly adding new materials. So they also have this really helpful, and I'm kind of envious of this. I wish I could do this for a DigLab. Project tracker. So if you have materials that were submitted to them, you can see what stage in the process they are, and you know, kind of have a sense for when they're going to be up. It can take quite a while because they have such a large backlog, but this is helpful because at least you can get an update. I don't think we have anything currently in the queue. I'm not seeing anything from our region. So I think like everything they've gotten from us has gone through. Any questions about New York State historic newspapers? Okay. And again, I'll send the slides out so you'll have that link available. All right, next we have the Empire Archival Discovery Cooperative. Some of you may be aware of this, and I'm not sure anybody here actually has any materials in it. It's a finding aids repository. So finding aids help folks know what they could find in physical repositories. So they're used in the archival profession to basically be the catalog record for large collections that are being described at the box or folder level, not necessarily item level like a library would. And Empire ADC is great in that it allows folks to create there's a template for creating the finding aids, it stores the finding aids, and it's also like a repository where folks can search and access the finding aids. This project's being run out of the Southeastern New York Library Resources Council. So they're handling all of the like statewide process for that. So the update on this, this has been kind of a project that's been gestating for a really long time at this point. Where we worked with a consultant to develop a cost model that would hopefully be equitable for really small institutions as well as getting some revenue from some of the larger institutions that have the ability to contribute more. So hopefully we'll have that implemented soon and have that that'll help kind of us move forward on this project. the good news is for most of you, if not all of you, I think the cost share for this project is like very minimal. It's I won't be able to rattle off the cost model off the top of my head, but I think it's very fair for smaller institutions with small staffs and small budgets. They have done a lot of work in updating the end user website. So they've done some more consolidating some of the sections of a finding aid. Just gonna hope that the example I'm pulling up is any good. So yeah, this is a finding aid from the American Numismatic Society. Of course, it doesn't have things in all the areas, but so, using expanding text to not make it be quite as long, it still ends up being really long, but you can kind of zero into the materials that are hopefully useful for you. Obviously still has some work to do, but they've made great strides in display. The next step, of course, is fixing some of the back end form that you're using to create the finding aids, which if I know at least a couple of you have used it, and it's a little rough around the edges. So that's the next stage in this process. Any questions about Empire ADC? Yeah, Amanda.
Is the information in it also on Archives Grid, or should I be telling people to look in both places?
Well, right now there's not a ton of content in Empire ADC. As we grow, I see it as kind of just another point of access for stuff. So it won't necessarily draw from or push things to Archives Grid, but the way it's structured, you can easily pull all of your finding aids from one and put it into the other, because this is one of several challenges that they had with the project was finding ways to harvest existing repositories of finding aids and bring them in a way that wasn't going to break everything else. But yeah, so if folks have materials in Archives Grid, they can put them over, but they would need to work with Empire ADC to do that. So Archives Grid probably has they definitely have a much larger, selection of finding aids. But hopefully, as this project actually takes off, that'll improve greatly. So, good question. Any other questions? All right, so this is a shorter section, and then I promise we have a break built in. So one of the things we've been working on over the course of the last year is Digital Dark Archive. So if you remember at the beginning how I said that New York Heritage is really just focused on access, and it's not really built for preservation or long-term storage. This is our answer to that long-term storage question. So as we're creating more and more digital collections, we need, we have all those files that are stored, hopefully backed up multiple places, but, anything with digital storage always feels kind of tenuous. And the Digital Dark Archive is intended to be kind of a backup for your backup. So this is not something that's at all, this is entirely not focused on accessing these materials. It's just on storing your digital files in long term. So this is also, we work with the Southeastern Library Council to run this service. We process the collections of files in Archivematica and send them on to Amazon Glacier, which offers long-term, inexpensive storage, but you pay to retrieve it. So the idea is you pay pennies on the gigabyte to store it, with the hopes that you don't necessarily need to get it back. But if you did need to get it back, you'd pay a per gigabyte fee to get it back. This is going to be offered as a so we did it as a pilot with New Woodstock. We uploaded, the collections that we had from them at that time, or as of last summer. And we plan to roll it out more broadly to especially all the materials that we're digitizing in our DigLab. That'll probably be the next set of things to be processed here. But then also looking forward, it'd be nice to get through some of the stuff that's already in New York Heritage. So you'd send us if we don't already have your original files, you'd send those to us, and we'd process them and get them ready for storage and send them on to Amazon. So the way that they're charging, the way that the fee structure for this works out, we're just paying a flat rate for our entire council's contributions to the Digital Dark Archive. So we're offering this as like a no fee for New York Heritage material. So anything that's in New York Heritage or is going to New York Heritage can be included in the Digital Dark Archive for no additional charge. If you have other materials, none of you are from universities, but if you had an institutional repository or had materials that weren't New York Heritage that you wanted stored, then it's, I think, $100 per 100 gigabytes per year or something like that. So you'd work that out separately. But anything that's going to New York Heritage, we're offering that as part of your membership in CLRC. Any questions about any of this? So this is really just a last ditch, like if all of your local backups are gone, or something happens to the hard drives they're on, or something like that, you'd be able to get your materials back. It's not something that I don't feel like getting the hard drive from my car. I'm going to just get them from the Digital Dark Archive. No, that's not how it works. But you get the idea. The idea is really just to pick up that slack where New York Heritage isn't doing the long-term storage particularly well. Any questions? Okay, I think I already asked that. Okay, so I want to give folks a little bit of a break, but before you break, if you could answer these 3 questions on the Post-it notes that hopefully you have near you, or you can pull one from a pad from nearby. You answer each question on a different Post-it note, and then you can put it up on the Post-it notes around the walls, and we can, after we take like a 15-minute break, we can have a discussion about what else we could be doing, what we could be doing better. So try your best. I know sometimes it's hard to get the creative juices flowing when you're sitting here watching me talk for 45 minutes. And then let's and we can resume talking about this stuff at 11:45. So it's 11:30 now. It'll be 15 minutes. My wife's a teacher, so I borrowed some teacher tricks from her.